We feel that hunger is forcing black women to become prostitutes to feed their children. It's forcing black men to rob and steal just to survive. It's driving Mexican Americans to narcotics and heroin and the like. We feel that all agencies, in spite of their sincerity, combined cannot effectively deal with the problems of hunger. We feel that a part of the violence in the streets emanates from the problems of hunger. We agree with most of the psychologists in the country that contends men are driven by their stomachs.
Yes, it looks like another student demonstration. But wait a minute, this one is different than some of the others that you've heard so much about recently. These students, several hundred of them, are actually demonstrating about going to school because they're finally going to get to go to school in their own school facilities, the new Skyline High School.
The Promised Land.
You actually call school the Promised Land?
Yes, sir, we do.
And this demonstration then is in favor of going to school?
Yes, sir, it is. We're all proud of Skyline, and we're going to make it a great school.
What is your name?
Sandy Wilson.
And what do you look forward to most in Skyline High?
Well, getting to the big building, biggest one in Texas and United States probably, and it's going to be great getting there.
We don't want West Dallas to be treated as a stepchild. We want a normal atmosphere. We shall work for this thing through popular and conventional means. Our children, as all citizens, must have an equal chance to find their happiness. Thus, in the name of the people, fair play and justice, I present this request to all of you and ask you for your help.
Paul Wayne Howell walked into Judge Gordon Gray's courtroom here in the Criminal Courts Building in Fort Worth, charged with murder and robbery by firearms this morning. Several minutes later, the accusation that he murdered Dykes Askew Simmons in September 1969 was dismissed for lack of evidence. Howell did, however, admit his part in the July 1969 robbery of Mrs. Dorothy Moody, the owner of an Evans Avenue liquor store. Judge Gray sentenced him to 10 years in prison for the robbery. Simmons, the so-called forgotten American, spent 10 years in a Mexican prison awaiting a firing squad after being found guilty of murdering 3 members of a prominent Mexican family. He escaped from the prison dressed as a woman and returned to Fort Worth about 5 months before he was found beaten and stomped to death on Fort Worth's south side in September of 1969. Jerry Park, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
To advise, to work with the mayor in this capacity to help understand what the woman, the female, and not only is she just a housewife and working to take care of her husband, of her children, but that she is also an intelligent human being, and she should be judged and graded upon her intelligence, her talents, not whether she's female or male.
Mrs. Dorothy Blessing was fired from her position of program director at the Fairchild House February 17th. She had been in that position since last March at this halfway house for outpatients of mental institutions. I contacted Mrs. Blessing today, but she referred all questions to the president of the Fort Worth chapter of the National Organization of Women, Mrs. Bill Dubose. According to earlier statements, Mrs. Blessing plans to file suit against the Mental Health Mental Retardation Center for sex discrimination in her dismissal. But Mrs. Dubose said a suit would probably be a last resort. The chairman of the local MHMR board, Jim Stiff, told me Mrs. Blessing was not dismissed because of her sex.
The position of program director at our Fairchild House was eliminated and the entire staff was restructured. It had nothing to do whatsoever with the fact that Mrs. Blessing is a female.
How much notice was she given?
She was given 1 day's notice to vacate her position. However, the center board of directors had directed our business administrator to pay her 30 days in lieu of notice.
Does she have grounds for a court suit against MHMR?
Of course, I'm not an attorney. We have some attorneys on our board who are very astute, but it would be my opinion that she does have no grounds.
Stiff also revealed the loss of another Fairchild House director only this afternoon.
This is entirely unrelated to the Fairchild House staff realignment. Mr. Lamb, who has been our business director for some 2 years, has accepted a position at the Wichita Falls Mental Health Center as administrative director.
The Fairchild House is in financial trouble. Stiff says there has been talk of even possibly closing the operation down, but that emergency funds are available on a month-to-month operation basis if necessary. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
the excerpts thereof?
Probably the reaction comes, I would say, probably from coaches and owners and sports writers, but for the most part, the athletes, football players that I've talked to, guys who've retired or guys who are actively playing, the response is very good. It's a situation where they've known this, has been going on for years, but I've just been along, been the first guy to mention it publicly. And so, for example, Mike Garrett, who said a literal quote, Meggyesy right, the game is dehumanizing. John Brown, Merlin Olsen, Roman Gabriel, people I've actually talked to and just spent hours rapping with, who said, that he's pretty right on. They agree with what I have to say, and they may not say it publicly, but they've said it to me.
Do you find that your approach to a lifestyle is atypical of the National Football League, the average NFL player?
I mean, that's obvious. And, there are weird kind of rules in NFL football, part of the dehumanizing process, which I talk about, bed checks, hair length, kinds of clothes you can wear, and so on. So it actually have nothing to do with playing football, but it's a means of exercising a certain level of obedience from the players, and coaches demand this. They want to see it go down.
I wonder, do you feel perhaps, or have you been criticized on, if you feel as strongly as you do about the allegations you made, dropping out in a sense, instead of working within the structure of the NFL?
It's always a problem, but I think when you really get right down to it, getting out was a matter of me not wanting to be punishing another person physically and not wanting to have that person punish me physically. And so I had to step out of that to be able to, to get away from that and not to do it. And I think that it must be pointed out there were 3 other guys who also quit football last year at the heights of their career: Rick Sortune, Chip Oliver, and Denny Moore. And Chip was a 6-year Rick was a 6-year veteran. And Chip was one of the most promising linebackers ever to come into the AFL, quit, and Denny Moore is a defensive tackle who's now living in Basalt, Colorado. So there were 4 of us last year, and I'm going to say there are going to be a lot more guys who are dropping out for very similar reasons. We are the modern-day gladiators, and that is a dehumanizing experience. And, we're the surrogates for a lot of people who have a lot of aggression. They get it out behind our activities, and for me to be doing that for people, I think is dehumanizing to me. I'm not helping anybody when I'm doing that.